Hello. The ethical dilemma of racial inequality is a dilemma that has been relevant for some time now. Although we have seen this dilemma grow from a major issue as it was in the 1960s and prior to the civil rights movement, all the way through the Reconstruction era throughout history, racial inequality has been a major issue not just in the United States but abroad as well. It's important that we recognize issues like unconscious bias towards these racial minorities as an important topic that relates to everyday life. Throughout this unit, I learned a lot about implicit bias and how it can apply to different kinds of minority groups. So it's important to identify that these biases as they occur throughout one's daily life and throughout one's education or workplace. And I was kind of confused as to what it meant, but there were several videos in the text that explained how unconscious bias is a preconceived notion that you have towards a certain group or towards a certain race, class of people, certain gender even. And it can be fixed by, even though it happens at a subconscious level, to where you might not realize in the moment that you are showing favoritism or being discriminative towards a certain group. I believe that through programming or through just sort of training your mind to have these biases fixed or have less of a bias towards these people, that it can be achieved. Another issue that the text mentioned was tolerable versus intolerable, and how there's a type of paradox when you think of a society as being tolerable. Because when you have a tolerable society, how does one tolerate the intolerable people? So you must be intolerable towards certain people who are intolerable of certain things. And that's where our class comes in, is where do we draw the line between what is something that's tolerable and intolerable? Obviously, we can declare certain things like murder and theft as intolerable, but it's our jobs as a society to draw that line as being generally tolerable of certain groups and minorities of people, yet being intolerable towards these drastic things that have drastic consequences for society as a whole. Another thing I wanted to discuss on unconscious bias was racial profiling. That seemed to be a big issue that I think still happens today, especially among African American youth with police authority. So I think it's important to touch on that especially when I mentioned earlier about training your mind to get rid of your unconscious biases. I think in that aspect of police force or police work, they should definitely take some classes on that, or it should be a mandated requirement for police officer training to take an unconscious bias test and determine whether that unconscious bias is there, and if it is, then to train hard to get rid of it. But as far as ethical dilemmas today, I think race inequality is one that we're definitely striving for and have definitely seen improvements from the 70s and 80s, as we saw in the Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes video, that it was definitely worse back then, but we're taking steps further today to improve these biases and lessen the racial inequality. Thank you.